So the way that I start this is I basically do like a figure 8, right? It's like the infinity symbol. So what I do is I pop a potion. Oh my god. What's up guys, Jimmy's Spot here. I'd like to take a little bit of time today to go through a bit of a longer video. We're going to talk about something unrelated to combat. As you guys know, we just finished this race to 500 guard, and we've started working our way into the other skilling professions. As of now, it's mid-December here. We're just breaching the 200 mark on alchemy and foraging. We're kind of coming up on 200 fishing, and our chef is a little bit behind. We're mostly just doing bounties around reset, stuff like that. But I wanted to take some time to talk about how foraging works and really a few tips on what make it really pop. Right? So foraging has a few different ways that you can level up the skill. The way that the actual skill works out, you have 3 tools. We've actually gone ahead and used the money from guard to get them all to 25, which is the soft cap. I'm not going to go super deep into enchanting, but enchanting is a very important method of getting more XP from certain forages. I will note that some forage nodes do not have any tools, so you won't get the XP buff. Some people have thought this was a little bit suboptimal, but we're going to kind of move past that. So the real trick with foraging is really broken up into 4 things, and I'm going to try and break this video out into those 4 elements so you guys have an idea of what this kind of looks like. So the first one is about pathing. The second one is kind of how you take this new node concept, whether you move to that node or you want to stay where you're at and continue getting XP on the loop you're currently on. And then how you measure a loop. Basically what things go into the loop and how do you know if one loop is better than another loop. And then last, we'll get into resourcing, meaning what do you care about most? Are you trying to optimize based on, is it XP? Is it gathering a certain resource? Is it a little bit of a mix of both? So we'll start with pathing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show on screen here. We've been doing this beach rotation that has essentially 6 crown shells and 3 kelp all mixed together into one loop. So it's actually just 9 nodes that we're recycling. On the west screen, you can see there's 3 crown shell. We kind of just do them in a triangle and head back to the east side. And on the east side, we grab 2 shells, then 1 kelp, the 3rd shell, and then the other 2 kelp. And what happens is this is just one path that I've elected to train during this kind of intermediate section of the foraging skill, which I could show you as being about level 185 is when you first unlock the shell. And that actually goes all the way up to 246, which is the Pondweed. So this is essentially a loop that I've elected to run. It's probably the longest that you're going to run any loop because of the scaling of the skill. There's a few like trade-offs that you could look at doing other things, and I'll kind of talk about how this works. But this path in particular involves all these different trade-offs, so I want to talk about each thing here. So again, we're talking about route pathing. So with route pathing, sometimes we've observed that it's not as efficient to necessarily let the game path for you. You need to kind of give it some assistance. So I would call this path correction as like an advanced concept, but really what happens is when you click on a square, it's going to bring you to that square in the manner that it sees fit. So when I'm interacting with like even this station right here, right? If I wanted to move over to here and I click this square, it's going to use a pathing algorithm that basically says, is it going to go over here and interact, or is it going to go over here and interact? And I think this game in general wants to do the diagonal first and then make a straight line. So it's trying to do this optimal pathing thing, but unfortunately what that means for some nodes, and I'll show this separately. So the thing that I meant to show is the concept of pathing for the shell loop. Now, these 2 kelps up here are particularly notorious for pathing. These 2 don't seem to be too bad. The game likes to put you on this western side for the shell as you run in if you click it immediately. I kind of like going east first because then it's like a clear east diagonal. This one's perfect. You always end up at the right square. You want to be on this side. This shell as well, you're never really coming at it wrong. But watch what this guy does here. He always is going to path north, and it's always going to be slower. So what you want to do is you don't want to go up here, because that's what the game wants. You want to actually path. Notice it also pulls him down here. We actually just caught up to this guy because we're able to go straight through and get it. So I'm going to basically have that as an example. You can see it saves almost like a full second every single time you do the loop, which you might not think is a lot, but you do like 60 of these loops and you just like got a full minute of your time back, right? So when you're really trying to press those levels and really trying to get the XP gains, you've invested in your trowel, you got it to like level 26, like these things do start to matter. So if you can reduce the overall time of a loop, that's going to help improve. So make sure you've kind of understood what pathing even means. And if you're willing to put in that extra effort, it can save you a lot of time, especially if you're having to do several thousand of some of these loops, which if you're really going to go for 500 foraging someday, you need to be ready to do that, right? So unlocking a new node, this is a little bit more math heavy. The general premise here is that every time that you unlock a new node, which happens very frequently, at a most, I think it's like 20 levels between any two nodes, you'll see like certain unlocks, you know, there's gonna be passive unlocks like the bulk spray here, the rosy maggot. For example, I'm only really concerned with this crown shell, and then although the potatoes give me more XP, it turns out that basically looping crown shell and something like silver kelp, these kind of combine better because I'm getting more XP per hour, and that's allowing me a much smoother experience. A lot of the time, people aren't going to really understand, well, what makes this better? This node's higher level. How do you really do it? And that's why I think the important step to really transition here to is this idea of measuring a loop.
That's quite big.
Measuring a loop is basically taking all of the things in a given loop, whether it's a certain number of nodes, it could be, maybe it's the amount of KP, like the distance between those nodes. The way that I do this is pretty straightforward. You basically want to start a timer. You guys know that I love my timers. And this timer, you're essentially just wanting to measure everything that happens in a loop. So how long is one loop? And then you just want to see, okay, well, there's 3,600 seconds in an hour. And then each lap takes this many seconds. So this is how many loops I can do per hour, right? That way, if you're measuring XP per hour, you have like a pretty precise measurement of what each lap's actually taking you and what that overall is going to look like. So when you're thinking of how you measure these, you need to be thinking in terms of our fourth point, which is, again, resourcing. So when you're making a loop, you just want to look at it very simply, okay? How many resources are on a loop? How much time does the loop take? And do I want to keep those resources and either bank them, or maybe I want to keep some of them. Maybe I don't want to keep any of them. Maybe I just want to focus on getting XP. And then there's one other resource, of course, which is knowledge points, right? So we call this like KPH, knowledge points per hour. So if you have higher KPH, right, you're breaking even 400 or 500%, then you need to start thinking in terms of, okay, all of this knowledge basically is going to be more important, right, than perhaps a method that's slightly higher XP, but generally lower KP. That's why sometimes, like my given example is a good one, you know, we're breaking 500% consistently, meaning 5 full knowledge points per hour. Whereas if we were to go to, say, Spiral Rack or one of these other upgraded spots, you're not going to quite have the same level of efficiency in generating the KP, and your XP is actually not even going to be as good anyway. So the trick with foraging definitely comes down to understanding how much XP each node gives, trying to look and see if there is like an optimal way to path the best nodes in your sampling together. Because if you could just get a constant loop of spiral racks, it would always be the best, right? If you had like 16 of them in like a circle and you could just get the 4, then get the 4, then get the 4, then get the 4, then obviously the respawn of the first node would be up, and you just keep doing that and you get amazing, you know, unbeatable XP, be a perfect loop, right? But the game is not laid out like that, right? Unfortunately, if we want to take a little look here, most of the loops on this screen are going to be very different, right? Like you have like a potato lily loop, you could do a bell plant nettle loop, you can do a nettle pondweed loop where you go in and get the 6 nodes in here, and then you branch the 3 and come grab the 6. So it all depends on how much effort you're willing to put in. I'll try and show a couple of the loops that I've used. Truthfully, there's a lot, and I could spend a lot of time going through this. You could take a really deep dive. So the first loop that you need to try is over here. This is actually the Western Kelp. So at level 0 to level 2, I recommend just getting Kelp. It's really all you can do. But one little pro tip here, if you want to try something a little different, instead of just getting the other Kelp on the beach, you could just literally stay here and get Kelp all the way to level 6. So what you do is you gather like 3 Kelp, and then you just run up here, and then you can kill the carnivorous plant that spawns here. So like this guy would be level 12 if you're like early game. But this is actually what I did. I was thinking back to like, well, what did I actually do way back then? But it turns out if you want to just make like an easy loop, really you don't have to go back to, you know, do anything different until level 6. The game doesn't let you buy upgraded tools. So basically the strategy here is that you would just stick around, and then once you do get to level 6, you buy 2 tools. So you buy the trowel, which you can buy at level 2. And then the secateurs, I think you can actually buy those at a... Are we gonna die here? That'd be so great. Oh my gosh, okay. Yeah, so by the time that you've killed that plant, you should be pretty dang close to a respawn. I imagine that the respawn time is about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. If you're like really demolishing the thing, you might be a little too fast. You could always like kill 2. It's not like a huge difference. But this is like a simple idea of how to do it, not necessarily like guaranteed to work or anything, but yeah, that's what I'd recommend. The second segment is going to be, if you want to instead loop, you could do wall plant and periwinkle. But I'm going to show the loop that I've been doing since this one makes a lot of sense to follow up with. So once you hit level 6 and you've got your trowel upgrade, you want to make sure you have the trowel because it actually won't let you get shells. So again, like all other nodes in the game, they kind of level up. So mine are level 185 and 161, but yours are going to be like level 0 and level 6. But you always want to be doing numbers that are closer to your level because you're going to get more XP from them. So the way that I start this is I basically do like a figure 8, right? It's like the infinity symbol. So what I do is I pop a potion, and then I'm going to get 3 of each node from this screen, and then 3 of the shells from the second screen. This track is only 9 nodes. It's very small, but this is what I'm going to refer to as shell kelp. It is very simple and it is very repeatable. You're going to do this loop at least 3 different times. Once at level 0, you'll come back here. You'll definitely come back here at level 77, around the time that you upgrade. I guess you buy your level 2 trowel at 78. And then you also come back here even later at 185, which is technically the gap that I'm doing. And you can optionally do this all the way up to about 246 before it's definitely pretty suboptimal. So again, I'm just gathering these few nodes here, and then we loop it back, right? So the idea is that you're always getting very high density nodes. Nice time for a disconnect. And that's basically one loop. So then I'm just going to loop back here. And what I do is I'm actually going to continue this lap. I'm going to actually drop all kelp because to me, the crown shell are worth a lot more. If you're low level and you don't need the money, I would really recommend dropping everything. I'm at the point where these crown shells are over 2 silver each. So every inventory, since I have 2 items in my inventory, is generally worth about 40 silver, which might not seem like a lot, but these laps don't take me very long. I think it's 6 shells every full lap. You know, after 3 laps, I think we end up banking, and then the next lap after that, I think we end up doing like 3.5, right? So it's always kind of balancing out. The time it's taking for each of these laps is not very long. So that's going to be the first one. Right, so I sped this up a little bit. So what's happening here, this is actually our last loop, and the last loop's always a little different. There's really just 2 types for the shell looping. I've been doing this one a lot, and if you guys plan on pushing past 200 foraging, you'll do it a lot too. So I recommend trying to understand what I'm saying here. So there's basically 2 different versions of this loop. There's one where you end up having 1 or 2 kelps left, and then there's one where you have a full number of shells. So depending on like where you start the loop, you generally have 2 different versions. So the storage rift spell, if you guys don't know what the storage rift is, it allows you to deposit items. Now this thing is very important because there's only strategically placed rifts around the map, but make sure you look into the quest called Spider Nest. Spider's Nest is a quest that requires technically a 32 carpentry and 20 woodcut, but you don't need the woodcutting to unlock the spell, as evidenced by my current skills. So that's going to be the storage rift. Let's move on. So once you get to level 16, after having done shell kelp for a little bit, you're going to be doing this loop called Bell Plant and Lily. Now you're not going to have the unlocks like the nettles on my screen and the northern screen, so you need to think about what you have available at your current level, right? So for me, having the ability to do different nodes here is very important. So we want to hit the bell plants first, and then you want to hit the lilies. The lilies, you're not going to be unlocking until level 16, so that's kind of what really holds you off from trying out this grind spot. You don't want to go to the bell plants, basically, even though you get them at level 12, until you can pair them with the lilies, because that's what makes it really good, right? That's why I kind of just say stick with the shell at the beach. It's not really going to slow you down at all. But getting to level 16, then you want to close out the last bit of levels here. But the thing is, you can actually push this strategy pretty far. You can loop this into the bell plants that are below. There's 3 more bell plant on this map node. And the way that I've generally done this is that when you upgrade the bell plant, it doesn't really get valuable from an XP standpoint until the bell plant significantly outweighs the potato. Like for me, in my current level at 191, it wouldn't be worthwhile for me to really hit these bell plants right now. Like technically I shouldn't even be here, but this loop will at least give you some context of what to do. Notice how we're like trying to travel between the nodes. There's a couple examples of the pathing that I was mentioning earlier. This guy in particular, when you're hitting it from the west, you tend to map north of it and it ends up being a bit of a problem. But notice how the loop is complete, right? The nodes above in the northern room are all respawned. And that's very important because you need to be able to get fresh nodes. You can see that the water lilies are just respawning about 3 nodes ahead of me, which is like perfect. Ideally, you want like just over 1 so that it's there to click on it when you need to path to it. But you can have some really tight loops sometimes where you have to do a lot of manual pathing. Manual just meaning you click to the square where it is, and then right by the time you get to that, it ends up respawning. Again, this video is being made in mid-December, so the drop all feature wasn't available when I was doing this, so a lot of the time people would just run it to the storage rift. But I do highly recommend, especially early levels, if you don't plan on using this stuff for alchemy, for cooking, whatever it is, then you can just drop them, right? So I'm gonna try and even get this guy at the end of the rotation here, but this should give you enough of an idea of how Bell Plant Lily can work. These potatoes may be lower level for you, but this basically is gonna get much better once you get to potato unlock. The potatoes will change a little bit, but for the most part, you can be doing this route consistently, because including the lilies is kind of the tricky part here. You're really just trying to get the really dense KP. So this loop is basically tried and true. It's gonna work for a long time. You're gonna be doing different mixtures of this, and sometimes you're gonna be going north. So let's take a look at the next grouping. So basically you can do this all the way from level 16 to 47, which is when you're going to unlock some of the upgrades here. So 47 is a key level because you get Kelp, which is basically the beach's first tier 2, if you will. And Kelp is important because it really does kind of push forward the loop outside of the XP. Like, you've been doing this area for a while. Your potatoes are 35. Bell plants and these water lilies are still like level at 16 and 12, I think. So some of the nodes are just getting like massively out leveled, and you don't want to be doing these more than like, 20, 30 levels because the XP's already fallen off, right? So the next one will show, basically starting as I go into this room. Keep in mind, this is starting at level 47. You can do a mixed loop here. So what I would do is just kind of have a really tight loop. Your bell plants are going to be lower level. Your potatoes would have upgraded at 35, so they're not so bad, right? So what I do is a closed loop here. So at level 40, I believe it's... Now, when do we get Hogberry? Hogberries you got at level 29. But the thing that makes this really good is at level 35, you got the potatoes, and then 41, you get the limpets. But now that you have the green kelp, you can do like this little bit of an outer loop. So what you do is you go all the way to the far kelp here. Since your starfish isn't your main upgrade, you want to try and like focus on hitting the kelps, because the kelps are going to give you the majority of the XP. You can grab the starfish. I'm just not a fan of it because if it's not like the higher XP tier, then you're technically going further out of your way with a little bit extra dead time. And what I do here is I actually use the starfish to kind of work around. I only do this for the density. Some people will basically just grab these 3, and then you can like either loop around and grab the potatoes. But the key strategy is that if you have the limpets unlocked, which is at 41, you can include the limpets, right? So I could have gone around the west side there, like grab 2 more starfish in that other node. Remember, you can always just use the drop ball, try and focus on the ones that have the most volume in your inventory, and you can kind of just ride this. Some people skip this Hogberry. I really don't know the exact math on it. It seems like it's definitely worthwhile the closer you are to a Hogberry, but when you get higher level, I could see kind of dropping it. But notice that as I push through here, we want to path manually. So watch this. If I just click on this node, what happens is it paths me to the side, right? So this is not good because you have to go around. But if you path manually, manual time is going to save you, because instead of gathering the node and then moving on in the node around it, because this type of node, bell plant, doesn't despawn after you gather it, you manually path on the south side of it here. Same thing with this one. You want to path on the side, right? Because we're not going to get this bell plant anymore. We're just here to pick these 3 potatoes once we've done like the upgraded version of the path. So make sure that you try and do some generic path improvements so that you're not wasting time getting caught behind things like that bell plant. Anyway, this is going to be the node here. So that's basically the first loop. So once you grab this last potato, then you go back to the kelp. And I'll show the extended version here just so you guys are aware of what the extended version looks like. I like trying to change it up a little bit. If I feel like I should be getting that starfish, because I think it upgraded at like level 18. So these aren't super great, but remember, they're all still very good for KP. So if you're prioritizing getting KP, which basically you always should be, then you want to consider what is the best loop, right, for the minimal amount of downtime. So as opposed to just running up there and grabbing the potato, if you're wanting the KP, which often you will be, I recommend just grabbing both these 2 starfish and then just going north. I don't hit well, you won't have the rack unlocked until later anyway, but I like just grabbing these 2, going north. You definitely don't want to do this if you haven't unlocked the limpets though, so only grab the limpets, which I believe are level 41, and then you get them later, of course, at 149 once they've upgraded. But the fancy fact with limpets is at level 41, you can also do a ray limpet strategy, which involves just collecting literally all 6 of the rays and then hitting all 3 limpets and this potato if you got your limpets nice and quick. And then like, see here, I'll choose to like sometimes just skip that Hogberry. It's a lot faster, makes the route a little bit more dense. Definitely kind of like up to you. You can kind of like test it at different leveling ranges, but in general, I'm not a huge fan of it. Notice how I'll usually click this square before it's been navigated to. I will go ahead and shout out one quick strategy feature if you want. There is a thing called walk to. You can actually set it to your middle mouse button. That way, if you like want to drop some item, but then you want to like you want to click to that square, but you know, you can't left click it. You can just middle mouse button and it'll let you run right over it. It is very handy, but I find myself using middle mouse button a lot to pan the camera, so it doesn't quite work so well for me. But yeah, hopefully that information is helpful for this loop. I tend to enjoy, out of all these loops, the bell plant and water lily one's really good. While we're here, I think we want to show the next loop that is very similar. So this loop is going to be a different loop. Technically, you won't do this loop until level 125, but it is probably one of the best loops in the whole game right now. So it technically starts up here with this bell plant. All right, level 125, what you do is you actually get these two bell plants. You basically cut this into like a north-south situation. You'll hit the 2 level 83 nettles, and then you actually go down and you grab the really close by water lily. This is my favorite loop in the game. You can literally get like sub 14 if you really know what you're doing at the right level, and you'll keep your levels like literally sub 15 for like 10 full levels. It's just amazing. So what you do, you actually want to grab this nettle from the south side here. But you can see that you can actually path your way through it from the bottom here, and it allows you to kind of quickly jump through a pretty interesting level range very quickly. So what makes this really unique is that you'll get this before you upgrade your potatoes. So once you upgrade the potato, you don't really want to be going all the way north to hit the nettles, because those will be about 50 or 60 levels lower by the time you get to them. But that's going to be the loop here. So you actually close it off by gathering this bell plant on the north side, and then you're going to go back and grab that first bell plant to complete the first lap. Again, you can drop stuff here. The nettles are very good for potions. I might be keeping my blood nettles even for XP pots. But the next one I want to show you guys is actually Pondweed, because this is an important one. Make sure you're upgrading your pond net for this loop. This loop is a bit harder because it's harder to see, but if we use sense here, you guys have a good imagery of it. You actually have to walk down this specific location. You're going to be looping 6 different pondweeds in here. And then you actually end the loop by getting the outer area, which is the 3 nettles. Now, these pondweeds are going to be tier 101, and then you won't upgrade them until 246. So not exactly optimal for me to do right now, but I'm basically grinding so that I can get to this spot. A lot of people really struggle here. It's not without good reason, right? This is one of the slowest leveling ranges in the game, especially as you get to like the end of Pondweed. A lot of people might even be KPing some of this as they're grinding. They could KP it from something else, but I'm personally, I think the hardest part to me is feeling the debilitating level speed, because 1, you're in the water, so you can like physically not move that well. But 2, you're also, you're gathering this material that it respawns in the water. Did I miss one? Maybe we didn't. You could just stay down in the water if you want. It's not really that big of a deal. Some people will just chill down there. I think the idea of getting the nettles is good, strictly because you can bank the nettles for a significant amount of money. The nettles are half of what go into making the 10% XP potion at tier 197. The lower tier nettles, I think, are used in one of the lower tier XP potions. So this area is where people will spend a lot of time. We're talking about dozens of hours if they're in that 246 to 284 range. So that should conclude this area. You'll get to this spot and you'll try and look at all the alternatives, but you really have to either think of like, well, what was the thing before it? We already did a bunch of that. It really does get a little bit challenging. So hopefully that clears up this pondweed and nettle loop for you. Anyway, I hope this information is helpful. I wanted to take like a really high level approach to foraging, just explaining it in terms that are pretty easy to understand. So hopefully that information is helpful. I will see you guys around, and have a good one.